On Talking Lifestyle, The Daily Drive. Brought to you by the 50 Up Club.
Yeah, Nick and Kayley cruising home, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Charles Tarbey from Century 21 and Property Fast Track. Here we go, Charles.
Thank you very much, Nick. Just a reminder, don't get a juji fruit before you start speaking.
I'll keep talking, and you enjoy your juicy fruit. So coming up tonight...
Juji fruit. That's
Juji
a
fruit.
Seinfeld episode, and they really are. I give them to people that come into my office to ask me questions.
That's great. Tom Panos is going to join us tonight. He does every Monday. Now, he knows his stuff. He's been auctioning places for many decades, and he'll give us the wrap on what went down across the markets, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney and beyond over the weekend. And we'll also have a look around the grounds and have a look at what went down, or what's happening in Clayton in Victoria. What's that market all about? And we'll talk to David Wood. He's the director and auctioneer at HockingStuart. He was the guy that auctioned the houses on the block last night. So that was an incredibly successful TV series. Over 3 million people tuned in last night. So we want to know why some of these places sold for more than the ones right next door. Quite extraordinary stuff. Some of the things coming up tonight, Charles.
Yep. That's all I can say.
You keep chewing, buddy.
Okay, so last week we found out Lonely Planet had named Canberra the third most exciting city on the planet. Can you believe it? You've been excited about Canberra, though, for a while now. So do you feel vindicated?
No, I talked about it going up in value, not about it being exciting.
Well, if it's going up in value, it is exciting.
Well, I guess
if you live there, I
guess
suppose.
so. Yeah. Look, it's got so much to offer in the true sense because of its stability, the government role, the public service, the international aspect of it. Why wouldn't you buy property there if you could afford to?
Yep.
And they're turning the airport into an international airport, aren't they?
Yes,
which is
same as up the Sunshine Coast, where I was on the weekend, working with Grant Smith. Our office there has been open for 10 years, and they're spending $400 million at that airport.
Wow.
International, the whole thing.
I'm hanging out for that very fast train project. I was reading about it again a couple of weeks ago. It's proposed and it's come back around again, and a great big corridor of development between hooking the eastern states together, Sydney and Melbourne, and all that land that exists between those two cities, and Canberra will be along its route. Sounds exciting.
It will be, yes.
There's a plan to build a whole bunch of cities around about 100,000 in population, a whole bunch of them scattered between Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra.
Well, if you fly across the US of a night time, you would have seen it. You see all of these areas. It looks like every 500 metres there's another city.
Yeah.
And that's what they've done. They've just connected, and people have just learned to live in these areas. And we, unfortunately, 90% of our population live in the eastern seaboard, mostly in the capital cities, and that's been one of our problems.
The very fast train project will never happen.
I know Kayley's a huge fan of it.
Never happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, I know.
It's just way too expensive.
It is too expensive.
No government's going to be able to get it over the line. It will never happen.
Well, if they build it, people will populate. You look at all those service stations that you never used to see on highways, and all of a sudden these little areas start popping up around them. And I can't compare that to the fast train, but it certainly gives you an indication that if the services are there, I think it'll give a chance for growth. But I think you're right about us not being alive. But anyway,
who would have thought, Kayley, for example, that Canberra would have had a lake? You see, you got to dream big. Someone thought, you know what, we'll put a lake in. Burley Griffin said, let's do a lake in Canberra.
Wasn't it already there, or was it man-made?
No, it's a swamp.
It's a man-made lake.
Yeah, it is a swamp.
That's how they got that big pipe down the bottom of it to put up that big sprinkler that goes off
The
every
big
now and then.
sprinkler.
What about Canberra for owner-occupiers? Plenty of jobs going in Canberra, stable employment, as you said, great place to raise a family. Is it affordable for owner-occupiers compared to the other big cities?
Yeah, I think it is, because Canberra's still expanding. Canberra was very well planned city all those years ago. They've got many new suburbs that they can open up. They can continue to expand, and that's what they've done. And they have been selling a lot of the land before it's even been released, but there still are other suburbs that can open up in Canberra and outside of Canberra, and Queanbeyan now that's connected. Those areas have still got so much potential.
13 12 83 is the number tonight. Charles Tarbey with a wealth of experience if you're considering getting into property or getting out of it. If you're wondering how the rental market's doing, Charles is here to take your calls on 13 12 83, or message us at talkinglifestyle.com.au.
First call now, 3,067,000 we're selling. Second call now at 3,067,000. Is there anyone waiting to bid? And 3,067,000 bid is there, no mistake. 46A Regent Street, it's going.
Yeah.
It's going.
Yeah. Here we go.
It's sold.
That's massive.
Bit of block finale action. Just a smidge. Under 3.5 million people tuned into the block finale last night, and they saw Josh and Elyse take out season 13 by selling their 5-bedroom house in Elstonwick in Melbourne for a cool $3,067,000, which means the couple pocketed a handy $547K for their trouble.
Interestingly, though, the next highest selling house wasn't their main rivals, Ronnie and Georgia, who were expected to give them a run for their money. Their house went for nearly $300,000 less. Instead, the only couple other than Josh and Elyse to crack the $3 million mark was Jason and Sarah, and all the season they'd been forced to redo their renovation work because it wasn't up to scratch and were the longest odds of winning the show.
Yep, it seems there's more to getting a good price at auction than just cosmetic appeal. Spa baths can drag you down. To tell us what we can learn from the block finale, David Wood is on board tonight. He's an auctioneer, and we heard him up the top there. He's a director also of HockingStuart. And good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
Now, David, apart from your great work as an auctioneer, why do you think Josh and Elyse won?
I think their house was head and shoulders above the others in the competition, and I think the 3 of their winning rooms being kitchen, living, dining, and together with the space that they did on the external space, they're all together, and that it flowed really well. And I think when people came into that space, that's what they loved, and that's the nerve centre of the home.
So the buyers thought that those components you've singled out there were worth $300,000 more. But is that reality, do you think?
300 more than the middle house? Well, look, I think so, because you can't fool the market, as Charles will tell you. When buyers go looking, they walk into 5 houses and they're not attached to any of them. So they have their desires as to what they want, but somehow when you look at it, if you were to try and pull one of those houses apart now and put it back together like Josh and Elyse's, it'd be every part of 300,000 to do it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, congratulations, David. Charles here. I find it really interesting. A lot of people that don't recognise the potential of a property that's presented a certain way. I mean, you can spend $50,000 on a home and get $200,000 more if it's done correctly. And I think that when you look at the properties that were auctioned, a lot of it comes down to the way in which it was put together and presented.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's really only 3 things that a seller can control when they go to the market, and that's the pricing of the home, the promotion of the home, and the presentation of the home. So if we stand back from them and say, well, they were all priced in a similar manner to start, they were all promoted in a similar manner, but it was the best presented house that shone through.
Josh and Elyse and Jason and Sarah, of course, their 2 houses stood out. Do you think it was a coincidence that they were the first 2 houses auctioned?
There's no doubt that the auction order certainly helped the first house. Our opinion, our advice to the contestants was if you have the ability to go first, you should try and do it because you're dealing with every buyer in the room. What we were worried about is that if one of the houses, say 2 or 4, went up first, and all of the buyers were, well, not all of the buyers, but the buyers that were unique to Josh and Elyse's home, if they were watching and witnessing that and they saw it sell, they might step out of that auction and say, well, and as you just said, is it really $300,000 more? And it may have had an effect on what they would be then prepared to pay for Josh and Elyse's home had it been second in the runoff.
Who decides then the order of how they go up for auction?
The contestants do. They get together on the day prior to the auction, and if they can't decide, then the producers have to decide for them, or have a competition, or toss a coin, or something like that.
David, were you party to giving them advice? Did you tell them what might work for them or what might not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. About a week out, we were really trying to stay close to the buyers, and it's a really difficult thing to do on the block. It's like trying to grab the soap in the bath. You think you've got hold of something, and it slips out of your fingers. And because the agents aren't the ones, we do show the buyers through the home, but so many times you'd speak to someone and they've already seen the home, or they were there at an advocate's night or something like that. So it's so different from the normal campaigns that estate agents run.
So you mentioned before that the two, in your opinion, perhaps you could argue the best two houses were auctioned first. What's the psychology behind that?
To set the price level that everyone can trade off.
Is that what we call kind of massaging the market or educating the market, if you like, as to what they ought to expect to pay? Well,
I don't think it's a great scenario if you had 4 or 5 unique buyers waiting for either house 1 or house 5, and you have really slow or not spirited bidding on the first 3 houses, and then you're supposed to throw some petrol on the fire and try and get it to the levels that we did last night, being the last cab off the rank. Very difficult to do.
Do you think the two houses were also on the outside of the block of 5, so they're not sandwiched like the other 3? Did that play a part?
I think it did. The bookends of the development. I think the middle one, when it was all completed, I think a lot of people in the middle one, Ronnie and George's house, probably felt a little bit overlooked either side. Josh and Elyse had the advantage that the boundary that they were on faced north, so they had better light than any of the other homes.
Yeah.
And then Ronnie and the first one, Jason and Sarah's home. Although they were off to a bit of a rough start on TV, if you were watching the series, you wouldn't have put them in second place. But people were commenting to us when they'd been through our house. They were saying either Josh and Elyse's or Jason and Sarah's were their preferred ones. And a lot of people don't necessarily like a swimming pool. So, and it was the only one that really didn't have that.
Yeah, the old pool one. It either people either love it or they just run away from it, don't they? I looked at a house recently that we're considering buying a home, and I thought, why didn't you put a pool in? And maybe for those reasons, it can polarise people. Yeah,
I've always said they're love-hate things, the swimming pools.
Yeah,
but here's an interesting thing. Sorry if I can.
Yeah,
people who missed out on Josh and Elyse's then went and bid on house 1 of Jason and Sarah's, and he didn't push his budget to the level of Jason and Sarah's because he wanted to. Sorry, he didn't push the bidding to the level of Josh and Elyse's on house 1 because he kept some cash up his sleeve to put in a swimming pool.
There you go. David, I think I know the answer to this, but what do you think the listeners will take from the block when it comes to buying or selling their home or presenting their property for sale?
I think the presentation's the huge thing, and those 3 key parts that I mentioned before: pricing, promotion, and Channel 9, the block. It's promotion on steroids, so everybody sees it. You're dealing with the whole of the market. Mm-hmm. But I think that what they need to do, home sellers should look at the market as their 5-week window to the world. So you've got to do everything you can, and in that five weeks, if you're running a normal auction campaign, to maximise the sale potential of your home.
It's always fascinating with these auctions. We did the telethon auction in Perth a couple of weekends ago, and there's always people that stop at the end of it because it had massive promotion like this did, and they stop and they go, "Oh, if I'd have known it was going to go for that price, I might have bid."
Right.
Did you have any of that after the auction, David?
I think the pricing was pretty consistent. So no, we didn't have any of that. In other years, we have had it, and you talk to people the day after, and they say, "Oh, I thought they were going to go for this, and they only went for that. We should have been there."
Do you think any of these buyers paid a premium because it had the block attached to it?
No, I don't think so. They are so hard to, when the block bring their properties to market, they're extremely difficult to accurately value because they're such a different product. I mean, there is nothing like those Elsternwick houses in Elsternwick.
Yep.
There was nothing like the Port Melbourne apartments that they did last year in Port Melbourne with that rooftop garden. So they bring such unique properties to the market. But the litmus test, I think, is the resales that we've had with block properties over the years. The sale prices for those homes after they've been resold have been consistent with the growth in the market for those suburbs that it has experienced. So they don't come back onto the market in 3 or 4 years and say, well, you paid a premium way over. the sales have been consistent.
So standing on their own merit. David Wood, thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Director and auctioneer at HockingStuart. And we heard him at the top of that little chat because he was the auctioneer on the block last night. Stay with us as we go around the grounds. And Charles Tarbey taking your calls tonight, 13 12 83 on Property Fast Track. There are some great advantages in being the world's largest real estate company. For a start, your Century 21 local office uses the best technology and knowledge base in the world, combined with the fact that each office is independently owned and operated. Your local Century 21 agent knows your city, your suburb, your town and your street. It also means Century 21 agents can offer a huge range of resources and experience, including information from over 300 offices around the country. We're going to talk to one in just a moment. It's no surprise Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent? Then contact your local Century 21 office and find out why they really are smarter, bolder, faster with ferocious appetites. Visit century21.com.au.
Now let's get a local area real estate snapshot. Time to go around the grounds thanks to Century 21's extensive national network of real estate agents. Joining us tonight, Con Katos from Century 21 in Clayton in Melbourne. G'day.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Cons. Charles. Con's
Hi,
one of
Charles.
the most senior auctioneers in Victoria, so this is why I wanted to get him on, not just because of the block,
Yeah.
but also because of the Melbourne market is still, although it didn't win this week, Canberra was the leading auction market this week at 77.1. The clearance rate for Melbourne was 71.7.
That's healthy.
Very healthy. So
Yeah.
why, Con? What's going on?
Charles, I just think Melbourne's continuing to have the supply and demand issues. Although it's spring and there's a lot more properties on the market, there's still a lot of buyers out there.
They had 1,983 properties go to auction on the weekend in Melbourne, compared to Sydney's 1,196. Yet you just trumped it again.
Yeah, Charles, most properties are going very well, but there is a little bit of unpredictability on some properties. So it's keeping us a little sharp with, how we handle every property.
Tell us about Clayton. It's in the southeast. What's good about Clayton?
Everything's great about Clayton.
It's the suburb you have when you're not having a suburb.
Yeah, it is. It's a suburb which people can't believe that our median price is now well over $1 million in a suburb that's probably over 20 k's out of the CBD. But there's a huge infrastructure. So we have Monash Medical Centre and Monash University, which are really on the map all over the world, not just in Australia. So we have a lot of foreign investment and people wanting to invest in properties around there with great returns, and there's a lot of infrastructure and the list goes on and on.
All right, so you've got a decent train service out there. We're also seeing lots of new apartment blocks pop up.
Yeah, there is, and there's demand for it. With the university, with the medical centre having a children's hospital sort of section happening at the moment, so there is demand for it. And what you have to understand is, from what I know, after the CBD, the Clayton area sort of employs more people than most of Melbourne. So there's a lot of action during the day in and around Clayton.
Con, the marketplace, as we said earlier, the two areas for me or three areas for me over the last year have been the Sunshine Coast, Canberra, and also the Melbourne market, mainly because it didn't go crazy in the early part of the boom. It stayed well behind Sydney, whereas other parts of the country, such as Perth, was actually almost the same median price at one stage, going back a few years. There's been a few more suburbs open up in those areas there. Do you think that the market itself is going to keep going, or do you think that it's hit a ceiling or going to hit a ceiling sometime soon?
Charles, I think we're still going to be strong for a while. I don't think we're going to have the growth that we've been used to over the last couple of years. And as I said to you before, you've got to be careful. Experienced agents have got to be wary that there are some properties that you don't just put them on the market and off they go. You really need to work these properties harder now than ever before.
It's changed, hasn't it? It's come back to a good qualified real estate practitioner that knows how to bring a buyer and a seller together. Whereas with the last few years, it's been people who are pretty active on social media who have gotten business, but they've gotten it without any real experience.
No, I'm actually enjoying it. The challenge, and we had 4 auctions on the weekend. We sold 3, and then one passed in, and we had to negotiate after. And it was great to be like old times, to actually have to work a little bit harder to get a deal through. So it's been quite exciting.
Given the proximity to Monash Uni, is it sort of a university suburb?
Yes, it is. So we've got a high rental, we've got high tenancies. So it is. In answer to your question, it is very high in students, in people who work at Monash, and then all the medical centres and everything else that sort of go with that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Con. It's a nice little look at Clayton in Melbourne. Appreciate your time. Con Katos there from Century 21 in Clayton in Melbourne.
13 12 83 is the number tonight. Charles Tarbey's here after a big round of golf over the weekend, no doubt, mate. You're looking super fit as ever.
Suntans, and that's normal. That's just normal.
It's in the blood.
It's all of the spray paint.
Charles is taking your calls tonight. If you have any questions to do with real estate, 13 12 83 as we talk property fast track. And we always love catching up with Tom Panos. He's an auctioneer and a 2-decade veteran of the business, fresh off a plane. Good evening, Tom.
Good evening. How's the team? And can I just confirm that you can hear me nice and clear? I've just entered an airport on the Gold Coast.
Breaker 19er, reading you loud and clear over. Tom, all good. Now, mate, let's talk about Sydney first up. What's going on here? The clearance rate slipped to 65%. You know, it's not the golden 80% this time last year. Trouble in paradise.
Yeah, so, look, I think what you're seeing is a lot of properties that are actually being sold with one bidder. So I actually even think that 65... I had a real estate agent say to me on Saturday when I was leaving a property in Tempe, he said, Tom, I think 65 or 70 or 60% is a rosy picture at the moment, because I think that, you know, people don't realise in Sydney that generally speaking, you've only got one buyer to do a deal, and if we've only got the one buyer, many of the times we'll actually sell it before the day of the auction on Friday. And he said to me, he spent all Friday going around visiting buyers in different parts of Sydney just to make sure that they would show up on the Saturday. And he said he hasn't done that for years.
Yeah, we were just talking to Con before from Melbourne, and we are back in real estate, and don't we all love it? Because this is the time. This is the time where it all really comes together. 60% or 70%. That's a very good conversion ratio, because a lot of the time when you talk doom and gloom, you're talking about, you know, auction clearance rates that are in the 30s, 40s, and you're struggling to get to 50.
Correct. It is. Look, Charles, it is back to normal real estate, and look, it's stressful. I mean, I don't know whether it had any relation to it. There's been by coincidence, two agents committed suicide in the last week.
Really? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's dreadful.
You know, and that is look. I'm not saying that, you know, that's the cause of it, but
sure.
And I don't know, but I mean, all I'm saying is that the agents I speak to are saying to me, you know, Tom, I'm just finding that I'm doing a lot of work at the moment and getting paid about, you know, the same or less money than before.
Yeah, look, that will change. What we do notice in these marketplaces, as you would have experienced, Tom, is that there are more homes come on the market. There are fewer agents, and generally the fees are far more stable. You know, we talk about discount agents out there. Well, look, a lot of agents have discounted their fees over the last few years anyway, and I think that now because it looks so easy, and in some cases it was. You put up a flag, Tom Panos comes out and starts talking until people throw enough money at him, and the agent's just sitting there watching, and then they knock the hammer down. Well, you know, that's gone, and those agents that think that they can run their businesses just for a few $1,000 fee, they're going to be working very, very hard for almost nothing at all.
Yeah. Well, Charles, I'm also repositioning what I'm doing on a Saturday now, because I know I can't do an auction at 9 o'clock and then have my next one at 9:45, because some of these auctions are requiring the agent to negotiate with the buyers and sellers for 20 minutes during an auction. So, you know, I'm spreading them up an hour apart now, and that's what life is, because you know that a lot of the time you won't get the reserve, but there'll be an agent grinding away with the buyer and the seller afterwards. But I've got to tell you, there's some great buying opportunities, and what I've noticed is some of what I call them the really savvy investors. They come out when they can sense a little bit of fear in the market, and I've noticed a few of them. They've started showing up on my phone saying, "Hey, listen, do you know if there's any properties, you know, that meet this yield requirement or this kind of block of unit or, an unrenovated house. And these people seem to only buy when there's a bit of fear in the market.
So we covered Melbourne a little while back, but we'll just touch on it quickly with you, mate. So we had 1,700 homes go to auction in Melbourne.
Yeah.
That's a big number. What were the clearances like?
Well, the clearance rate, it was still over 70%. I think it finished off at 71 or 72%.
Yeah.
So Melbourne is continuing to actually remain resistant and resilient. And real estate agents, I spent a fair bit of time in Melbourne last week, and I'll be there later on this week. They've actually briefed me for the training that I'm running. They want more listings. They said, don't worry about spending too much time about, getting them sold. If we had more stock, we'd sell them. So Melbourne, look, it's still very strong.
All right, so an amended figure. In fact, Charles has an amended Melbourne figure of over 1,800 homes that went for auction.
1,983
auction over the weekend.
Right across the state. But as I was saying, the clearance rate was 71.7%, which is really quite magnificent when you look at what happened in Sydney.
So the steam seems to be out of Sydney. Melbourne's powering. What's Brisbane doing? Brisbane,
we did under 50% this week. I think off the top of my head last week they were around that 50%. I think you probably got the figures there. Is it 41 or 42% for Brisbane?
Last week was 50.5. You're right. So it has dropped slightly, Tom. There's a little bit of nervousness there in that marketplace, which I think is a very good place to watch.
Tom Panos, mate, it's always a pleasure to have you on the line. Enjoy your next journey. You've jumped off a plane and you're set to come back and join us again next Monday. Appreciate your insights, Tom Panos, Auctioneer. Appreciate it, mate. All the very best. Charles, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Nick.
It's always fascouting. So there we go.
I took note also that you're out buying, so I've already sent messages to people. You'll get a few calls in the morning, Nick. If not, a couple later tonight.
Well, thank you.
Helps to know someone, doesn't it?
Well, I was feeling quite happy because, it's been a very competitive market and it's nice to know there's some light out there. Charles, we'll see you again next Monday for Property Fast Track. 13 12 83 is our number tonight. And you can also email Charles ahead of next week's show. If you've got a question you want to kind of form up and pre-prepare that he can address for you next week, just email it in to talkinglifestyle.com.au.